Three of the most powerful automotive brands on the planet don't respond to individuals. They respond to governments, dealerships, and billion-dollar contracts. So when Bugatti, Ferrari, and McLaren all moved against the same man, at the same time, it wasn't a coincidence. It was a signal. Matt Armstrong didn't steal anything. He didn't defraud anyone. He rebuilt salvage cars in a garage in England. And somehow, that was enough to make three supercar empires nervous. His name wasn't always known outside a small circle of UK car enthusiasts. There was no trust fund, no industry mentor, no dealership with his family's name above the door. Matt Armstrong started where most people finish, at the bottom of someone else's workshop, learning what engines sound like when they're dying, and figuring out how to bring them back. He didn't go to university for mechanical engineering. He didn't intern at a manufacturer. What he had was an instinct for broken things, a tolerance for long hours, and at some point, a camera. That camera changed everything. His YouTube channel started picking up traction not because of production value, not because of a viral moment. It grew because he was doing something the mainstream automotive media wasn't. He was showing the inside of these cars. The real inside. Not the glossy press release version. The stripped, damaged, exposed version that tells you what a car is actually made of. By 2022, his channel had crossed 4 million subscribers. By 2023, that number pushed past 5 million. His videos weren't getting hundreds of thousands of views. They were getting millions. Consistently. A single rebuild series on a wrecked Lamborghini pulled over 12 million views. A McLaren restoration series crossed 8 million. But here's the number that actually mattered to the brands. It wasn't the view count. It was the audience profile. Matt Armstrong's viewers aren't 12-year-olds watching for entertainment. They're adults. Many of them are in the market for performance cars, either new, used, or rebuilt. When a video showing the internal structure of a McLaren 720S gets 8 million views, that's 8 million potential buyers forming an opinion. About panel quality, about repairability, about whether the price tag is justified by what's actually underneath the carbon fiber. That's not a YouTube video anymore. That's a consumer report with a bigger audience than most automotive magazines have ever reached in their entire publishing history. So here's a question worth sitting with, and drop your answer in the comments because this one matters. Do you think car manufacturers have the right to control how their vehicles are shown online, even after the car has already been sold to someone else? Because that question is exactly what this entire conflict is built on. Matt Armstrong wasn't broadcasting leaked documents. He wasn't inside a factory he wasn't supposed to be in. He was working on cars he or his associates legally owned, in a garage in Northamptonshire, England, with a camera rolling. And still, three of the most image-conscious brands in automotive history decided that what he was doing required a formal response. What looks like a success story from the outside, working-class mechanic builds a media empire from salvage cars, is actually the first frame of a much more complicated picture. Because the announcements that followed didn't come from junior legal associates sending templated letters. They came from the top. When a salvage car arrives at Matt Armstrong's workshop, it doesn't arrive with a press kit. It arrives broken, stripped of the mythology, sitting on a flatbed with its airbags deployed, its frame twisted, and its carbon fiber panels cracked open like an eggshell. And the moment that car goes under workshop lighting with a camera rolling, something happens that no manufacturer can script. The truth comes out. A salvage rebuild is not a repair job. It's an engineering autopsy. Every decision the factory made, every material they chose, every weld they placed, every corner they calculated was acceptable to cut, gets exposed. Not in a laboratory, not in a regulatory filing. On YouTube, in 4K, to millions of people who actually care about what they're looking at. Take the McLaren 720S. It retails at approximately £210,000 in the UK. The marketing is immaculate, aerospace-grade carbon fiber, a twin-turbocharged 4.0-liter V8, a chassis architecture borrowed from Formula One philosophy. That's the story McLaren sells. But when a 720S comes into Armstrong's workshop after a significant impact, the camera doesn't care about the brochure. It shows where the carbon tub ends and where conventional materials begin. It shows how certain repair sections are designed, or in some cases, whether they're designed to be repaired at all. That last detail matters more than most people realize. Part availability for McLarens, particularly older models like the 650S or the 570S, has been a documented frustration in the independent repair community for years. Lead times on structural components stretching past 6 months. Panels that can only be sourced directly through the manufacturer at prices that make the repair economically irrational. When Matt's videos show those realities in real time, they don't just entertain. They inform a purchasing decision. Ferrari's situation is different, but equally sensitive. Ferrari doesn't just sell cars. It sells exclusivity as a financial instrument. A Ferrari isn't supposed to depreciate, it's supposed to appreciate. The brand's resale mythology depends entirely on the perception of flawless construction and controlled scarcity. A rebuild video that shows structural repair work on a Ferrari Roma or a 488, completed in a private workshop without factory involvement, quietly chips away at that mythology. Not dramatically, not with accusations, just with footage. And footage, in 2024, is evidence. Bugatti operates on an even more extreme version of the same logic. The Chiron starts at approximately $3 million. The Veyron, its predecessor, was famously described by its own engineers as a car that lost money on every single unit sold. The profit came from the brand value it generated. When your product is priced on the idea of absolute, unreachable perfection, any public documentation of its imperfection is a threat. Not a legal threat, a perception threat. And in the luxury market, perception is the product. None of this required Matt Armstrong to say a single negative word about any of these brands. He didn't need to editorialize. They didn't ignore it. Here's what actually happened. Not the rumor version. Not the fan theory version. The documented, sequenced, verifiable version, because that version is strange enough on its own. McLaren moved first. In late 2023, McLaren Automotive updated and publicly reinforced its position on salvage title vehicles and third-party restorations. The core of their stance was this: any McLaren that has been written off by an insurance company and subsequently rebuilt outside of an authorized McLaren retailer would not receive factory support. No warranty, no technical assistance, no parts supply through official channels. The language was careful. It didn't mention YouTube. It didn't mention content creators. It referenced unauthorized rebuilds and vehicles with compromised structural history. But the timing was not random. McLaren's statement came within weeks of Armstrong's McLaren 720S rebuild series crossing 8 million views. The series had generated significant discussion, not just among enthusiasts, but in automotive forums where used McLaren prices are actively tracked and debated. Dealers had noticed the comment sections. Insurance underwriters had noticed the repair cost data being casually demonstrated on screen. Then Ferrari moved. Ferrari's response was more structural than declarative. Rather than issuing a broad public statement, Ferrari quietly tightened its approved certified pre-owned program criteria. Vehicles with salvage history, regardless of the quality of repair, became categorically ineligible for Ferrari's official certification program. That certification matters enormously in the resale market. A Ferrari without it loses a significant portion of its value proposition to the next buyer. The message was architectural. We are not going to argue with you publicly, but we are going to make the downstream consequences of your rebuild very expensive for everyone involved. This channel covers the stories the automotive press won't touch, because the press needs manufacturer access to survive. Press fleets, launch invitations, exclusive interviews. We don't need any of that. If that kind of unfiltered reporting is what you're here for, the subscribe button is sitting right there. Then Bugatti made its position known. Bugatti's communication was the most direct of the three. Through official channels, Bugatti Rimac, the entity that now owns and operates the Bugatti brand following Volkswagen Group's restructuring in 2021, issued guidance stating that any Bugatti involved in a significant insurance event should be considered for factory evaluation before any third-party restoration work begins. The word they used was should, not must. But in Bugatti's world, should from headquarters carries the weight of a mandate. 3 brands, 3 separate announcements, 3 different formats, a policy update, a certification change, and an official guidance document, all within the same 4-month window. These are competitors. Ferrari and McLaren have been fighting over the same buyers since the 1990s. Bugatti exists in a category so rarefied it barely acknowledges the other two publicly. They don't share press releases. They don't coordinate messaging strategies. Their PR teams work in different countries, in different languages, for different ownership structures. And yet, the sequence is too clean to be coincidence and too spread out to be coordination. Which leaves a third explanation, one that points not at the brands themselves, but at something that connects all three of them. But there was a fourth player in this story, one that none of the headlines mentioned. The fourth player wasn't a brand. It wasn't a lawyer. It wasn't a regulator. It was a platform. And it was the same platform that made Matt Armstrong powerful enough to matter in the first place. YouTube. Everything Matt built lives on YouTube. 5 million subscribers. Hundreds of millions of views. Years of content cataloged and searchable and generating revenue every single day. That's not just an audience, that's an infrastructure. And like all infrastructure, it has vulnerabilities. Ones that don't require a courtroom to exploit. Here's how the pressure works without a single lawsuit being filed. A brand files a content ID claim against a video. YouTube's system, which is largely automated, flags the content. The video gets demonetized while the claim is reviewed. That review can take weeks. During those weeks, the video generates no ad revenue. If the creator disputes it, the process extends further. If the brand escalates, the strike goes on the channel's record. 3 strikes and the channel is gone. Not suspended. Gone. No judge. No jury. No public record. This isn't theoretical. Automotive content creators have been navigating this terrain for years. Channels covering Ferrari track day footage have received claims over engine sound recordings, the argument being that the acoustic signature of a Ferrari engine constitutes proprietary intellectual property. Channels featuring Bugatti walkarounds have had claims filed over interior design elements visible in the footage. The legal validity of these claims is almost beside the point. The process is the punishment. And YouTube, for all its scale, over 500 hours of video uploaded every single minute as of 2023, does not have the infrastructure to adjudicate these disputes fairly at speed. The system defaults to the claimant. The burden falls on the creator. Matt's channel, by the time the brand announcements landed, was generating significant monthly revenue. Estimates from third-party analytics platforms placed his channel earnings in the range of £40,000 to £90,000 per month from ad revenue alone, before sponsorships. That money lives or dies on YouTube's goodwill. And YouTube's goodwill bends toward entities with legal departments. There is a legal principle called the first sale doctrine. It exists in both US and UK law. The core idea is straightforward. Once you buy something, you own it. You can resell it, modify it, display it, film it. The manufacturer's control over that object ends at the point of sale. It is one of the foundational principles of consumer ownership. The digital economy has been quietly dismantling it for 15 years. Not through legislation, through terms of service, through content policies, through automated claim systems that treat a corporation's discomfort as equivalent to a copyright violation. The law says Matt Armstrong can film anything he legally owns. The platform's architecture says something more complicated. Think about the last time a company tried to control how you talked about something you already paid for. A review you left that got flagged. A complaint post that disappeared. A warranty claim that went nowhere because you'd modified something the company didn't approve of. The mechanics are identical to what Matt was facing, just operating at a scale where the stakes are someone's entire livelihood. The brands understood this asymmetry perfectly. They didn't need to win a legal battle. They didn't need a court order or an injunction. They just needed the process to be expensive enough, in time, in stress, in legal fees, in lost revenue during disputes, that continuing started to feel irrational. It was a calculated siege, not a battle. And then Matt Armstrong did something that none of them expected. He didn't lawyer up quietly. He didn't post a careful, PR-managed statement full of measured language designed to de-escalate. He didn't take videos down. He didn't reframe his content to soften the edges. Matt Armstrong picked up the camera. His response came in the form he'd always used, direct to camera, in the workshop, surrounded by the evidence of exactly what he did for a living. No studio. No teleprompter. No media trainer standing off to the side. Just a mechanic in Northamptonshire explaining, with the kind of clarity that only comes from someone who genuinely believes they've done nothing wrong, exactly what had happened and exactly what he intended to do about it. The video went up, and the audience responded immediately. Within 48 hours of his response video publishing, his subscriber count moved visibly. Not a modest uptick, a spike. Third-party tracking tools that monitor YouTube channel growth recorded an acceleration that placed him among the fastest-growing automotive channels in the UK during that specific window. The comment section didn't fill with sympathy. It filled with something more useful, anger directed outward at the brands and loyalty directed inward toward him. His audience didn't read the situation as a scandal. They read it as confirmation. This is the dynamic the brands catastrophically miscalculated. In a traditional media environment, corporate pressure works because the target depends on institutional relationships to survive. Pull the advertising. Deny the press access. Make one phone call to the right editor. The story disappears. That playbook is 50 years old, and it works. On journalists who need sources, on publications that need revenue, on broadcasters that need licensing agreements. It does not work on a man whose entire operation runs on the trust of 5 million people who followed him before any brand ever acknowledged he existed. Every official statement McLaren, Ferrari, and Bugatti released, every policy update, every certification change, every guidance document, functioned as an advertisement. Not for their products. For Matt Armstrong. Each corporate response told millions of people, this man is significant enough that we had to respond to him. In the attention economy, that is an extraordinary gift to give someone you're trying to diminish. The subscriber numbers reflected it. The view counts on his existing rebuild content climbed as new viewers, arriving from the controversy, worked their way through his back catalog. A 2-year-old McLaren rebuild video that had settled into a steady trickle of daily views suddenly spiked again, not because of the algorithm, but because people were looking for context. They found it, and then they subscribed. Matt's strategic positioning during this period showed a level of media intelligence that most trained communications professionals would struggle to execute under pressure. He remained specific rather than emotional. He referenced the facts of his situation without overstating them. He let the audience draw conclusions rather than handing those conclusions to them pre-packaged. That restraint was the most powerful move he made. Because the moment a creator becomes the angry one, the moment they start sounding defensive or victimized, the narrative shifts. The brand's legal team suddenly looks reasonable by comparison. Matt never gave them that opening. He stayed calm, stayed factual, and kept building cars on camera while the controversy burned around him. By the time the initial wave settled, something had changed structurally. His channel wasn't just bigger. It was harder. The audience that arrived during the conflict was more engaged, more loyal, and more likely to defend the channel against future pressure than the casual viewer who stumbles in from an algorithm recommendation. The brands had tried to make an example of him. They made him bulletproof instead. The story didn't end with a settlement or a ban or a viral moment. It ended with something far more permanent. What changed wasn't Matt Armstrong's subscriber count. What changed was the map of power in automotive media. And once that map changes, it doesn't change back. For decades, the relationship between car manufacturers and automotive press operated on a simple, unspoken contract. The manufacturers provided access, press cars, factory tours, launch events in Monaco and Sardinia, and the Nürburgring. The publications provided coverage. Favorable, framed, carefully timed coverage that arrived exactly when the manufacturer needed it. Both sides understood the arrangement. Neither side talked about it openly. That contract assumed there were only 2 parties at the table. There aren't anymore. The salvage rebuild niche on YouTube didn't exist as a meaningful category before 2018. By 2023, it had become one of the fastest-growing automotive content verticals on the platform, channels in this space collectively generating billions of views annually. The audience demographic skews 25 to 44, with above-average household income and documented interest in vehicle purchasing. These are not passive viewers. These are buyers. A 2023 study by Tubular Labs analyzing automotive content consumption found that independent creator content generated 3 times higher viewer trust scores than manufacturer-produced content across all measured demographics. 3 times. The glossy 60-second brand film that cost £400,000 to produce was trusted less, significantly less, than a man in a workshop showing a cracked subframe on a camera he bought himself. Manufacturers are not ignoring this data. They can't afford to. Several major automotive groups have quietly restructured their creator relations departments in the last 2 years, moving budget away from traditional press fleet programs and toward creator partnership initiatives. Ferrari launched a more formalized content creator access program in 2023. McLaren expanded its social media engineering content. These are not coincidences. They are responses to a shift in where consumer trust actually lives. But here's the structural reality those programs can't solve. A creator who takes manufacturer money loses the thing that made them valuable in the first place: independence. The audience that followed Matt Armstrong followed him precisely because no brand was telling him what to film. The moment that changes, the trust erodes. Manufacturers know this, which means their creator programs are less about partnership and more about containment. Keep the influential ones close enough to manage, without giving them enough to compromise. It is the same logic that built the traditional press relationship, just faster, cheaper, and aimed at people with welding equipment instead of press credentials. What Bugatti, Ferrari, and McLaren did collectively in that 4-month window was make something official that the industry had been pretending wasn't true. Independent creators now operate with the same market influence as established automotive media. Not similar influence. The same. In some demographics, more. They weren't invited to that table. They built their own table. In a garage in Northamptonshire. And then 8 million people sat down at it. The brand's announcements, stripped of their legal language and corporate framing, were an acknowledgement. An uncomfortable, reluctant, carefully worded acknowledgement that one man with a camera had become a force significant enough to require an official response from 3 of the most powerful automotive companies on Earth. That's not a YouTube story anymore. That's an industry reckoning. Matt Armstrong isn't the only creator the industry has tried to silence. There's another story, bigger budget, longer legal battle, and a brand that went much further than an announcement. That one's already on this channel.